This is AJ Nagaraj. Thank you for the introduction, Rihanna. As she mentioned, I'm the AVP for Advancement Strategy at Stony Brook University on Long Island, and I'm really excited to be co-presenting with you, initiating innovation, how an Office of Strategic Initiatives can embed data and analytics into your advancement shop's culture. I'll go ahead and let my friend and co-presenter introduce himself.
Thanks, AJ, and greetings from Pasadena, California. My name is Mark Longo. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives here at the California Institute of Technology. And I'm really excited to be talking with everyone today about this topic.
So our goal during this session is to introduce you to the Strategic Initiatives function in advancement, share a little bit about its purpose, what kind of projects it leads, and discuss the competencies needed for success in the position. But before we do all of that, we wanted to step back a little bit and share the thoughts of a vice president for advancement who has managed both Mark at Caltech and me at Stony Brook.
So here you see a picture of Dexter Bailey, who is our current vice president for advancement and alumni relations at Caltech. And he previously served as Senior Vice President for Advancement at Stony Brook University from 2011 to 2019. And as AJ said, he's probably one of the few individuals we know who has actually managed this function at two different organizations. When we asked Dexter to tell us about his impression of strategic initiatives, this is what he had to say. Having a skilled colleague versed in the art of data analysis and presentation with a donor focus has been invaluable. The strategic initiatives position has enabled us to take on important problems directly related to our day-to-day work that don't fit neatly within other departments. By design, strategic initiatives involves a wide range of interdisciplinary inputs in order to get the best results and recommendations. Moreover, the outcomes help us educate and cultivate campus leadership toward our shared goals based on objective data. Now, let's unpack his quote a little bit because it really does put in essence what we wanted to talk about today. So I think that there are four key phrases or words in Dexter's quote that really define what we're talking about. The first phrase is the art of data analysis and presentation. Not only do we need to understand data analytics, but we also need to know how to best present the information to a variety of audiences who may not necessarily be versed in analytics. The second phrase I want to point out is the words donor focus. As we all work in the fundraising industry, it is important for us to remember who our target market is for the work that we do. Thirdly, I think in the second paragraph, the word interdisciplinary is really key. The work that AJ and I do, we're really able to connect the dots between various advancement functions. And what we have both found is that we work most effectively when we bring colleagues together from various teams. And finally, the last two words in the quote, objective data. The data that we focus on should be based on fact and unbiased. Now, how did I get into this role? I have 20 years of experience in fundraising for both nonprofit organizations and higher education institutions. I led the advancement services teams at both the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the National Geographic Society. Prior to joining Caltech in 2013, I spent 7 years working at Georgetown University. I'm currently in my second $1 billion plus campaign. And over the years, I've managed staff in a variety of advancement disciplines, including advancement services, annual giving, foundation relations, development assistance, stewardship, communications, and events. Now, when I was looking to leave Georgetown, Caltech really was an interesting opportunity for me. And they actually created this job specifically with my background in mind. It's a unique role that did not previously exist at the institution, nor did it exist at many other institutions at the time. Um, in my role, the areas of expertise that I focus on include benchmarking, change management, fundraising operations, project management, and strategic planning. And in fact, when I look at my position description, I'm spending about 25% of my time supporting Dexter on his board of trustees activities, another 25% of my time on benchmarking projects, and then the bulk of the time, 50%, is on strategic project management.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Mark. Just a bit about my own background. I've been at Stony Brook for 3 years, and my main areas of responsibility are somewhat similar to those of Mark. They include reporting and analytics to inform major gift officer performance management, innovation-oriented initiatives, including digital advertising for annual giving and stewardship, as well as fundraiser hiring. Project management and general operations for our division of about 90 staff members. I also have a very small portfolio of major gift donors that I manage. Prior to Stony Brook, I worked at the research consulting firm EAB Global in Washington, D.C., where I managed and conducted philanthropic analytics for a group of about 11 private research universities. And I also led best practice research studies on advancement topics such as fundraiser selection and performance management. Some of you might be familiar with the curious chameleon model that emerged from a research study that I conducted on the attitudes, behaviors, and competencies associated with success among major gift officers. Much like Mark, my role at Stony Brook was created specifically with my background in mind. Later in this presentation, we're going to be showing you some examples of other institutions that have created strategy roles like ours. And my educated guess is that many of these positions were created in a similar fashion. One goal that we have with this presentation is to create a blueprint for advancement leaders that will help them identify people with the skills that are relevant to this kind of role, so that in the future, when these positions are created, it's not really a kind of a coincidence that VPs manage to find individuals who have the right skill set.
Now, before we continue, I think it's important for us to define what we mean by the phrase strategic initiatives. Now, many universities have what they term strategic initiatives, but these are usually what they would consider the big ideas for their institutions. When we talk about strategic initiatives in the context of an advancement operation, we really are looking at something completely different. Greg Githens, in his book, How to Think Strategically, defines a strategic initiative as a boundary-spanning endeavor that intends to achieve 3 interrelated goals. First, achieve a strategic intent or vision. Second, provide benefits to significant stakeholders. And third, transform the organization. This definition best sums up the approach that AJ and I take when it comes to strategic initiatives at our institutions. And I'm going to abbreviate and say SI because it's a lot easier to say. So SI is the confluence of where leadership, value, and change management all meet up. Now, AJ is going to tell you a little bit more about what we do and why our function is needed in your advancement operation.
You might be wondering what an Office of Strategic Initiatives does in a more concrete fashion. So Mark and I will be covering about 10 specific areas that this role can take on in a couple of slides. But first, I'd like to provide a higher level 30,000 foot view on what kinds of activities it can work on. First, nearly all of the projects that this office works on span multiple advancement teams and leverage national best practices to enhance both the effectiveness and the efficiency of an advancement division. When I reflect on my own role, not a week goes by during which I'm not working with annual giving, marketing communications, advancement services, major gifts, as well as alumni relations. Next, the role is frequently involved in change management activities involving major shifts in technology, operations, systems, and processes. And while these projects involve significant collaboration with advancement services, Mark and I play a unique role in that we have enough technical knowledge to understand how these systems and processes on the back end should take into account the needs of the end users or the business users in each of the individual units. And finally, these activities commonly involve using data and analytics to help inform day-to-day decision-making for advancement leadership. So I'm frequently asked to analyze large data sets or educate others about how to do this themselves. And beyond just conducting the analysis, much of my role involves instilling in advancement a data-driven decision-making model. So some of you might be used to hearing the statement, "We've always done it this way," from your colleagues. I think that part of my job at Stony Brook is to help banish that sentiment from our operation. So now that we've covered at a high level the activities in which this role is engaged, you might be wondering why this position is needed in a modern advancement shop. First, this function is not a side of the desk job. Instead, it's a dedicated role focused on pursuing innovation and best practices. So it's not an AVP for advancement services who has a lot of other responsibilities and is thus only spending 10% of her time on innovation. Having someone whose entire role focuses on these boundary spanning initiatives means that these projects don't fall by the wayside just to ensure that the trains are running on time. Additionally, Mark and I have found that this position can be the glue that holds together disparate and increasingly siloed functions within advancement, from annual giving to marketing communications to alumni relations. It helps an advancement division recognize and understand the importance of cross-team projects and collaboration. Finally, this position serves as what I like to think of as a utility player of sorts. So it's able to be rapidly deployed to whatever might be a priority area for a VP for advancement. So on a weekly basis, I'd say at least 20% of my time is spent on capitalizing on unexpected opportunities that pop up or on managing unexpected challenges that face our division. So having a pretty diverse set of skills, as well as knowledge of every area of advancement and deep relationships with leaders across our entire division makes me uniquely suited to take on these opportunities as well as challenges.
Now that we've discussed at a high level what a head of strategic initiatives aims to do and why this role is important, let's discuss in more concrete terms what this looks like on a week-to-week basis. Here on the slide, you'll see 10 potential areas that AJ and I might work on in a given week. And I think both of us have worked on all or nearly all of these areas. I'm going to talk about the ones on the top row, and then AJ will talk about the ones on the bottom row. So first and foremost, you see, is change management. And in my opinion, change management is probably the most critical task that we both work on. I have the luxury of having been certified as a ProSci change management practitioner. And ProSci, that did the certification, defines change management as is the process, tools, and techniques to manage the people side of change to achieve the required business outcomes. And I think what's really critical to know about change management is that it's not about the process, but it's really about the people. And the work that AJ and I do is really a people-focused role. Next, you see benchmarking and ROI analysis. As I previously stated, I spend upwards of 25% of my job at Caltech on benchmarking, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about benchmarking in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Originally, benchmarking was implemented by Xerox Corporation in the 1970s. And the CEO of Xerox, David T. Kearns, defines benchmarking as the continuous process of measuring products, services, and practices against the toughest competitors and those companies recognized as industry leaders. The reason why we do benchmarking and change management projects is because we are looking to implement innovation and process improvement at our organizations, which is that third function on that top row. The next one is Board of Trustees related initiatives. Again, I had indicated that about 25% of my job is spent doing board of trustees activities. And this is something that's really important for our advancement operation and to stay focused. And finally, strategic planning is really important. And it's important because you need to determine what your organization will choose to do or choose not to do. And having a plan is essential to strategy.
So the next area I'd like to talk about is alumni engagement, which is a major area of my work. I'm currently working, for example, with our marketing and communications team and our alumni relations unit to determine how we might go about doing a better job of analyzing what topics most resonate with each of our alumni, and then moving to a more personalized communications model by sending them content that we know will interest them. I'll go into more detail about data enhancement on the next slide, but this is essentially the process of convening business users around the division in order to identify gaps in the comprehensiveness as well as the accuracy of constituent data, and then prioritizing the closing of those gaps. The third area is campaign planning and analysis. Stony Brook finished its most recent campaign about 2 years ago, and over the at the end of that campaign, of course, our president, deans, foundation board, alumni board, as well as internal stakeholders like our fundraising managers, were really interested in understanding how we performed. So a lot of the work that I did at that point was conducting an extensive analysis of everything from our gift proposals to the actual gifts, donors, communications, event attendance, as well as many other items, which really helped our internal constituents better understand the value that advancement brings to the university, our tremendous ROI, areas of opportunity and challenges, and much more. It would have cost us tens of thousands of dollars to have this done by a consultant, but beyond the cost savings, the quality of the result that we achieved, that I achieved through collaborating with our advancement services division, was significantly better because we have such a much more intimate understanding of our data and operations that render it much easier for us to conduct that kind of analysis. Next, I'll go into a greater detail with digital marketing on the next slide, but at a high level, again, this is really the practice of running ads on platforms like Facebook and Instagram to support areas as diverse as annual giving, alumni relations, and other units. Finally, the global view on our division that I have has really helped me understand and lead our hiring initiatives. So I've been able to work with our managers to design a new centralized hiring process for our frontline fundraisers, which features a set of behavioral-based interview questions. And I've also been able to collaborate with our HR business partner in leveraging new innovations in technology to bulk up our talent recruitment initiatives.
So with that in mind, AJ and I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth with a few projects that we work on. And so I'm going to start first. And let me start first by talking about centralized benchmarking and best practice resource. So some of you may have heard me present on this particular topic at previous conferences at CASE and AASP. But my colleagues have sort of nicknamed me Mr. Benchmark at Caltech. When I was originally interviewed by the VP of Caltech, who was Dexter's predecessor, I was told that the president and board of trustees had challenged him with establishing an advancement operation that was comparable to the finest in our industry. And so I asked him, I said, so exactly how do we do that? And he's like, well, I need your help in thinking that through. And so the more that we discussed and talked about it, I realized that we needed to do benchmarking. We needed to study others. We need to study those schools that we perceive to be our peers, both real or aspirational. And we needed to then incorporate what we learned into our processes at Caltech. Now, you want to learn from others and gain objective data to help you decide if what you're studying will work within the culture of your organization. So at Caltech, I am the main point of person for all of our benchmarking activities. And as such, whenever there is a benchmarking study that comes in from another organization, I'm the point person that everyone within the advancement shop goes to sort of streamline and answer those benchmarking studies. I also manage our relationship with EAB, which is who we do all of our benchmarking with through a consortium. And that's how I originally met AJ back in December 2013. And finally, every year, I work with my colleagues across all of our advancement offices within Caltech, and I help them solve problems by commissioning a host of benchmarking studies so they can determine how to best adjust their programs and activities. And so, for example, right now, I'm working on a benchmarking initiative to look at how we give credit to development officers for dollars raised. So it changes about every year. I probably do maybe half a dozen or so, and I have a great group of colleagues at institutions across the United States and beyond who have been very generous in sharing information. And that's what's great about our industry, is that we are very generous in sharing. And so any of you that would like to benchmark with me in the future, please feel free to reach out. The second area I want to talk about is our staff intranet. And this has been a pet project of mine and something that I'm very proud of at Caltech. So when I came on board in 2013, we did not have a staff intranet, and our VP had said that he wanted to have one. And so I worked with a host of colleagues, both within our advancement shop, but also within our IT team, and we developed what I consider a best-in-class staff intranet. This has really helped us to strengthen employee engagement at Caltech. But more importantly, it's become one of the most effective internal tools that we have in our toolbox. And especially now that we're all working from home due to COVID-19, this has become even more critical and essential.
So now I'll share a bit about two examples from Stony Brook University. One of the first things I noticed when I arrived at Stony Brook 3 years ago was that we had many gaps in both the comprehensiveness and accuracy of our constituent data, which is something that's quite common in most advancement shops. So we convened the heads of annual giving, alumni relations, advancement services, of course, including prospect research and data services, in order to collaborate on determining where our priority areas were. And so for us, that was data such as date of birth for non-alumni, data on presence of children, along with high school alma mater data, as well as employer and industry info for our constituents. This data was really critical to us in helping to build predictive models, but also helpful for other reasons. So, our data services team worked with vendors to find the optimal data set for these data appends. And now our database has a significantly higher field population rate across the fields I mentioned earlier. And this has really helped business users do all kinds of things. So for example, armed with high school alma mater data, we discovered that thousands of our alumni were also graduates of the top 3 New York City specialized high schools. So Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and Stuyvesant High. And we knew that they had very strong cultures of their own. So we organized a special dual alumni event for alumni of those 3 schools who also went to Stony Brook at a beautiful location in the shadow of One World Trade Center, and it attracted over 60 attendees. So that's just a great example of how we can actually put that data into action after convening all those business users and figuring out what's most important. The next initiative I'd like to discuss briefly is our digital advertising work, and this is really something that Stony Brook has become kind of a national leader in. And it traces back really 2.5 years to when Dexter Bailey, our senior VP at the time, charged leaders around our division to come up with an innovative, totally out-of-the-box idea to increase our alumni participation rate. And we finally settled on digital advertising, which essentially involves targeting alumni and donors on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn with video, photo, and article-based ads. This practice is really common in enrollment management and athletics, but pretty uncommon in advancement. We've now run 65 of these campaigns across 4 use cases, including annual giving, planned giving, increasing event attendance, and stewarding donors by demonstrating the impact of their philanthropy by highlighting student scholarship recipients, doing profiles of faculty who won national awards. We often pair these digital ads with annual giving direct mail appeals or planned giving newsletters so that 72 hours before these mail pieces reach our constituents, they begin seeing content in their Facebook news feeds. So for example, let's say a video of a student scholarship recipient if the appeal is about scholarships. The initiative has touched nearly every area of advancement and has generated nearly $1 million in revenue. And we've received the Gold Award from Case District 2 for this initiative. We've even begun using LinkedIn targeting to recruit staff members. So 4 out of 5 finalists for a recent recruiter role that we had posted came from a LinkedIn ad that we only spent $1,000 on. So that ad targeted all individuals living on Long Island who held one of 16 job titles, such as recruiter or director of recruitment, and had experience in higher ed or healthcare. So this project is a perfect example of how uniquely positioned a strategy-focused individual is to take on innovation-oriented initiatives that might initially relate to just one unit, so in this case, annual giving, but have the potential to be relevant to many others, from planned giving to alumni relations to marketing communications, as well as events. So I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Mark to talk a little bit about this role nationally.
Thanks, AJ. So on this slide, you'll see 14 institutions that we are aware of that have a strategy role. And there's probably at least another dozen or so that we're missing from the slide. But in most cases that we've observed, the head of the advancement strategy or strategic initiatives typically reports to the chief advancement officer or an AVP. And really this function in advancement shops is relatively new and young. As I mentioned, when I started at Caltech in 2013, I did try to see who else had that type of role. And the only other school that I was able to find that had a similar role at that time was Columbia, who started their position in 2011. 2015, Princeton and Central Florida embraced the function. 2017 brought 4 additional schools, including AJ at Stony Brook, and so on and so on. As you can see, it's a small but mighty cohort of institutions that have begun to see the value in having a person focused on advancement strategy.
So as you can see from the previous slide, the head of strategic initiatives can have different titles and roles within advancement, but we found that the person who occupies this role tends to possess the following 10 competencies on this slide. I'm going to cover the competencies on the left and then kick things over to Mark for the ones on the right. So the first competency is really the skill to gather and analyze data in order to generate insights that provide decision support. This means being able to secure data from internal and external sources at your university, convert the data into a format suitable for analysis, analyze the data set, and draw meaning from the resultant figures. While this can be a technical skill set, the ability to crunch numbers in Excel is necessary but not sufficient. Also, this person must serve as a bridge between data experts. So for example, your head of data services and business users such as the heads of annual giving, marketing communications, and alumni relations. At Stony Brook, we have hundreds of thousands of constituents in our database and thousands of data points on these people. And so I'm required to understand each business area's needs so that I can ensure we're providing them exactly the kind of analysis they need. Next, this person must have extensive knowledge of higher education and every area of advancement. Specifically, he or she needs to grasp the goals of each team and have a vision for how more and better data could help each team accomplish and exceed its goals. Since this person is often a project manager navigating between disparate functions, he or she must also be able to synthesize massive quantities of data into digestible, easily comprehensible reports for leadership. And finally, this position requires a rejection of insularity and a willingness to scour the nation for best practices among peer institutions. So the person in this role really needs to possess a strong network of peers, vendors, consultants, and others. I used to work with about 150 advancement shops during my time as a research consultant at EAB. And I don't think it's a coincidence that both Mark and I are very active on the conference circuit and in organizing convenings around the country.
And, AJ talked about that this position is often a project manager. And so I'd like to add that one critical competency for a strategic initiatives professional is about having that attention to detail and being deadline sensitive. Oftentimes we're juggling various projects at the same time, and you have to be able to stay on top of things both at a 30,000-foot level, but at the very minor detail level as well. Second thing that I find is really critical is being politically savvy and the ability to operate in an environment where you're often the person doing consensus building. Because you're going to come across folks in your operation who are a little bit suspect of the outcomes that you're driving towards. And so you need to be able to navigate the political waters very carefully. Experiencing complex problem solving is something that I think is a critical component of this role. And being able to have good judgment and to act decisively once you know what you want to do is really good as well. As AJ and I are both individuals who aren't typically having a team reporting to us in this role, the ability to be a self-starter and to work independently is critical. I remember when I first came on board, everyone kept saying, well, who's on your team? And I looked at everyone and said, well, you're all on my team. The entire advancement shop is my team. And so while I may not have staff directly reporting to me, I do work with every team within our advancement operation. I will say though, and I know AJ alluded to this in the previous slide, he and I both get called upon by our VPs to step in and manage various teams as necessary when there are vacancies. And so we both have done that at both of our organizations. And finally, I think a person in this role needs to be very comfortable with switching often between very different functions. And so I believe that that's also a critical competency. So AJ and I would love to share some of our favorite resources with you. We are happy to share our position descriptions. So if you would like our position descriptions, please send us an email and we'll be happy to send that along to you. As benchmarking is a very critical component of the work that we do, I've listed here a number of our benchmarking resources that we both use on a regular basis. I'm sure many of you are familiar with a lot of them. And we can come back to that later if you want to talk a little bit more about these benchmarking resources. And then staying on top of industry trends is, I think, another critical component for us. And so reading various news media, websites, articles, etc. And so I've listed here some of those industry trends that I follow. So I think if you're in this role, you need to be sort of continuing to educate yourself about what's going on in our industry. And that comes to the future of strategic initiatives. And this is where we want to have a discussion with you all about what you think the future is as well. And we'd like to use this opportunity to answer some of the questions that have come up as well. So AJ, I don't know, do you want me to start or would you like to start?
Sure, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a fairly young component of an advancement operation, But I think what we're seeing, at least in my discussions with VPs across the United States, they're realizing the importance of having someone like AJ or myself being able to step in and get things done at a very high level. And so I suspect that you'll see this as a growing component of advancement shops in the next 5 years. And, you know, I think that the work that we do is going to become even more critical as we're looking at new ways of engaging with our donors and constituents.
I think,
Would you,
you know, one
would
of the
you
items that I think will
Yeah.
definitely come about in the coming year when it comes to advancement strategy is that I think the individuals in these roles will begin to interact more frequently in order to share best practices. And so, you know, Mark and I happen to know each other because, you know, he used to be my client when I was at EAB. But my goal is that more of us will be introduced to one another in the coming years in order to share time-saving resources, templates, and ideas with one another.